Hello, how are you? So this week we had the Women's March on Washington, and I had heard about the fact that it was gonna happen, and I was like, right on, sounds good, man. I didn't really know what it was about. And then as I kind of watched things unfold and talked to people and saw different responses online and all over the place, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, this is perhaps one of the most unaccomplishing events I've seen in my lifetime. They're saying that the march is the biggest one we've had since the 60s and 70s. And I think to myself, what a waste of resources. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that the Women's March on Washington was completely and totally irrelevant. But when you talk about words like relevance, you have to understand what they mean. Because you can't just throw a word around like relevant and not explain the context in which you're using that word. For something to be relevant or irrelevant, it must be object-oriented. No, that gardening magazine is not relevant to me. I don't plant daisies in my backyard. See what I mean? I believe that the Women's March on Washington was irrelevant to 3 different types of people. 1. The organizers. The timing of this event, I just don't get. They kept saying that it wasn't an anti-Trump protest. That was primarily the discussion that was being had. People living in fear that the new president of the United States of America was going to destroy all of the progressive movement that was made for the rights of women. I just don't get it. Now look, I'm not one to sit here and tell you that Donald J. Trump is a good guy, but all of the allegations that are being made about people saying that Trump is going to drive this nation backwards for an era of women's rights is based on very little information. You can't go on to say that Donald J. Trump is destroying women's rights when the information that you have is limited to a few recorded conversations. Donald Trump is not someone who's shown that he's going to wipe away the rights of women. Number 2, women. You can't just take a list of divisive issues, which was at the core of the platform of the Women's March, and say that those things apply to all women. According to some recent studies I had heard, women are more and more driving away from the title of feminist because of the crazy things that they know that that movement is associated with. No longer is it a matter of standing up for women's rights. Feminism has taken many divisive issues where people stand on both sides of the fence and they promote it as if this is what all women believe. And that's simply not true. You can't claim to be a women's march and then not represent all women. 3, unborn children. And this one really grinds my gears. Campaigning for the rights of one group cannot alienate the rights of another. And here we have millions and millions of unborn children whose voices have been silenced. People are talking about my body, my choice. Well, what about the baby and their choice? You give them none. And you do so when its heart starts beating as early as it does. You do so when its organs are formed as early as they are. You do so even as clinical science consistently and repeatedly confirms the fact that what is growing inside of you is a human life. Now look, this is such a broad conversation. There's so many aspects to be considered. I think to begin with, we have to understand that you can't claim rights here while crushing rights of another over here. Scripture has always been clear about what God thought about people who sacrificed their children to idols. You may say that that's not what's happening now. Are we not sacrificing our children to the God of convenience? Notwithstanding other considerations about different situations, but most of the time, are we not sacrificing children to the God of convenience? This is the first and foremost reason why I believe the Women's March on Washington was irrelevant and time wasted. If you have comments, comment below, and we'll see you next time.